Hi, I'm Catherine. Welcome to Strange and Stranger, a podcast of a strange girl talking about strange things. Rambling is an art. Hey, welcome to today's podcast. Welcome back. Glad to get to talk to you again. Now I started this podcast to be able to sort of talk about my medical issues and this new life that I'm leading, new adjustments and the new places that it's taking me. And I found an article and I've just got life and it's taking a strange direction. Didn't really have a plan when I started this particular podcast to talk about anything specific, which is pretty much rambling. So here I am. So today I went to the doctor again, as I do, and we talked about the prescription that I'm on, and how I'm not increasing this month, because we don't think that would be a wise decision, because the medication that I'm on is really harsh and it's really taken a toll on my body. Talked about a few other things, and then I mentioned that I've had reduced movement in my shoulder, my left shoulder, and how I had thought that the new pain medication was going to take care of that, but I still had a lot of pain in the shoulder, and so I was thinking that maybe it wasn't this idiopathic pain, but maybe there was a cause. So he did some manual tests in the office, and I'm going to get an ultrasound, but based on the movement that I have, or the lack of movement, the two sort of options will be either a frozen shoulder, which is basically stiffness in the joint between the two bones, or I'm getting an ultrasound, and an ultrasound will show if there is a tear in the tendon there. So either some sort of corticosteroid shot and a saline injection, hydroblast something, or possibly even surgery are now real possibilities in my future. And it was just one more setback, like they just keep coming. I remember on the episode where I was talking about my fibromyalgia, it's like, well, I've got all the things I can get now. Ta-da, I'm done. I guess today it really hit me that it's never done, that this is a really ongoing thing. Yeah, and that was really frustrating for a couple of hours, and I got really angry. And I feel like I'm going through the stages of grief, like, over and over and over again. A friend of mine sent me a link to this really cool article, and I thought I would read it and sort of digress about the article, what I think I sort of agree with, what I don't agree with, similarities, differences. So this comes from The Age, and it's written by Naomi Cheney. To survive chronic illness, I needed permission to grieve for myself. So that title really resonates with me just right off the bat, because I found it really difficult to face up to who I used to be, because that's no longer who I am. Alright, so let's begin. I will never forget the abject fear I felt when I first fell ill with chronic fatigue. The illness also known as myalgic encephalitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome. My mind and body were losing function. The time I could spend on any given activity before collapsing was reducing rapidly. Everything was heavy, as though gravity had been dialed up to 1,000. My digestive system came to a total halt. I was nauseated, dizzy, and aching. I do really understand what she's saying there. For me, the memory, I lose memory, having to make lists and write things, and it can be really frustrating when you have a thought a moment before and then it's just gone. The other thing is my mobility has been severely impaired. So standing up can be a really taxing activity, which you don't think of standing as a taxing. You think of standing for 10 hours as a taxing thing, but standing for 10 minutes shouldn't be necessarily, but it is now for me. I definitely get the nausea, the dizzy, the aching. Some of those are because of the illnesses, and some of those are because of the medication, but I definitely understand where she's coming from there. Okay. The world was louder and brighter and moving faster than I could physically process anymore. And everything from eggs to shampoo suddenly smelled awful. Oh, I feel really bad for her on that account. My throat and eye sockets hurt. I couldn't concentrate and struggled to recall numbers and names. Yeah. I remembered staring at my sister in horror one day, unable to put a name to her face. Yeah, I struggle sometimes. I won't say it's as bad as seeing a person and not remembering their name, but I will be thinking of somebody and not be able to remember their name. Go, oh, I want to send this to that person that I talked to, and you have to type somebody's name in, especially with like Facebook or text messages, to be able to send something to them, and to not be able to just rapidly recall that person's name can be really frustrating, and scrolling through your contacts is really frustrating a lot of times. Alright. I was generally afraid that I was dying, but all the tests came back normal, and medical professionals were only able to offer a collaborative shrug. My distress was met with confusion rather than empathy. Screaming and waving for help in a crowded room, I was invisible and no one could hear. I understand how, if you don't understand medical things, and this is something completely new to you, that you could feel like you were dying. I don't think that I've ever felt that way. I've always felt really lucky that while I am ill, that it's not killing me. My mortality isn't something I have to really deal with yet. I'm not, it's not cancer. I'm not really worried about dying. My life is changing, but death isn't one of those things that I worry about. I do understand the medical professionals. They don't know what to do. Like I said with the audiologist, the doctors just go, wow, this is just such a strange case. And they've been saying that at me, not to me, at me, since I was 7. So I really understand that. People don't understand why I get so sick and why my body overreacts in such a ridiculous manner, and that's something I'm only learning to understand. But yeah, the medical community sort of goes, but you should get better. Alright, let's move on. I was a full-time student with 2 part-time jobs when it started. By the time I was diagnosed, 8 months later, my life was reduced to meals, napping, and watching TV in manageable bite-sized chunks. I moved in with my dad. He helped me with things like carrying groceries, driving me to medical appointments I could no longer reach on my own steam. I'd lost weight. I was incredibly bored. I resonate fully with this paragraph. I had a full-time job. I was really happy. I was living in a great apartment in the city. I was enjoying life. And now, granted, this has been going on for a long time, but I would say my severe decline has started since maybe even as early as August 2016. In December, I moved in with my parents. All part of a process, not all because of the illness, but definitely a big part of it was. Mom does things like my laundry, cook my meals, bring me coffee in the morning, wake me up, help me out. I couldn't get through an average day without my mother. So I totally get that. I've definitely found that I've been losing weight, which it hasn't gotten to a drastic point yet, so that's not a medical issue yet. But yeah, I am incredibly bored. I watch TV, listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. I don't barely often have the effort to hold a regular book, to read a regular book. I listen to audiobooks because I still want to get stories, yet often I just physically don't have the energy to look and read. So yeah, I get this, like, right on par. I remember gazing from a car window around that time at a group of teenagers playing frisbee, running to and fro laughing. I was more envious in that moment than I'd ever been. I didn't even like frisbee. Never played it, but the option had always been there, and now it's gone. I suddenly hated those kids for not understanding how lucky they were. I hated my former self. How could I have not understood the privilege I'd had? How could I have taken it for granted? I can definitely understand this feeling. It's a bit different for me. I was definitely a high energy, high activity sort of person. I love things like playing frisbee, especially with my friends. And I think that's one of the hardest things for me, is that I'm no longer able to participate in those events with people that I previously participated in those events. And trying to explain to them why I can no longer participate in the events with them is this big sort of block that I have, especially when it comes to reaching out to people that I previously hung out with quite frequently. Looking back, that was the moment I properly understood that this was real. My life as I understood it was gone. The ambitions and dreams that had defined the independent woman I'd been were no longer within the realm of realistic expectation. That woman had been snatched away before I realized what was happening, and I hadn't had a chance to say goodbye. I was grieving for her, and I had just shifted from the stage of denial to anger. I'd say that that's where I am right now. I'm incredibly frustrated that she says it really well. My life as I understood it was gone. The plans I had for my life are no longer available to me, and this isn't going away. This is real. It's going to continue. And I thought I'd changed my expectations, but I don't think that I really had. I think that today was a real turning point for me, where I realized that I'm going to learn a lot more new illnesses and new problems that, I didn't think I was going to get, because my body overreacts to the smallest of stimuli. And so with this autoimmune problem and my body overacting to stimuli, that a small bump in my shoulder could cause a serious problem that may require surgery. And, if I bump my knee later, that it might be that. I was sort of reveling in the fact that I'd gotten all my diagnoses out of the way, and now I could start to get better, but that's not the case. That's not how this is going to work. So yeah, I would definitely say that I'm properly understanding that this is very real. Okay, moving on. Unfortunately, because of the stigma surrounding chronic fatigue and a community conditioned by medical dramas to expect sick people to recover by the third act, I was isolated in my grief. There was no support because no one, doctors, friends, family, was willing to accept this was a permanent situation. I definitely think that broader community expects that you're going to recover or die. Like, those are your options. I'm lucky enough to have a couple of close friends who understand chronic illness and understand that I'm not going to get better, and that, I'm learning to change my lifestyle. My family are also coming to terms with that. I think they still have hope that I'm going to get better, but I think that's just the optimism that they have. But I definitely have this stigma from the community at large that I'm struggling to overcome and to re-educate, and I don't know why it's my burden to re-educate everyone, but at the same time, if I want them in my life, then I'm going to have to do that. The only disability in life is a bad attitude. To grieve was to give up, and there was shame in that, the sense that I was shirking the responsibility of becoming well again through sheer force of will. I could be ill for a time, but eventually enough would be enough, and I was expected to get back to my old life. Yeah. So, I've seen a couple of videos recently that have really sort of put a shame blanket over the fact that, that there's this force, this sheer force of will that can make you get through anything. And they look, by themselves, they are inspiring stories, people who went through a severe burn traumas and had to have many surgeries, who now run marathons, and people who without legs who, walk further than I'm walking. And people send me these stories going, look, you can do this too, and I don't think they fully understand how much it makes me feel like I'm not trying hard enough to get better. But that's not how life works for me anymore. And I'm having trouble communicating that to people. It's really just hard to say, look, there's some really inspiring people out there, but you know what? There's also a lot of people out there who tried really hard, but are still really sick. Okay. Recovery from chronic fatigue is rare, about 5%. Improvement is more likely within the first 5 years, but even so, only 13.5% of us are able to participate in paid work, even part-time, and 25% remain house or bed-bound. There are no effective treatments and very little research funding available for their development. I will say that I am part of a graded exercise therapy, but it is sort of based upon symptoms, minimizing symptoms and improving quality of life. It is not a cure. It is not a treatment plan like a physio where you just get better. It's not an exercise regime where you get stronger, quote unquote. But there is only some evidence that says it works, and that improvement is very independent and very marginalized. Moving on. Adding insult to injury, the benefits of behavioral therapy for chronic fatigue has been dangerously overstated by certain researchers, definitely, leading to a disproportionate focus on recovery when people with chronic fatigue reach out for psychological support. We are more likely to be encouraged to pick ourselves up by our bootstraps than assisted through grief and lifestyle adjustments. I'm really happy that I have not been told to pick myself up and keep moving on. I've been assisted to make these lifestyle adjustments with how I live, how I interact, what sort of limitations are put upon me. I make decisions with my mother on whether or not I can go out and what I can do and how far I can go with my energy. And having somebody there to say, I don't, is this going to be a positive step or is this going to be a step back, is a really helpful thing to have. This can leave people with chronic fatigue in a psychological bind, ricocheting back and forth between bargaining and depression. Bargaining in our case inevitably means spending limited cash on unproven treatments. A sizable portion of the alternative medicine industry profits from our desperation. These rarely work, of course, resulting in an unrelenting cycle of hope and determination followed by disappointment and despair, which can go on for years, fueled by unrealistic social expectations and misplaced guilt. My aunt always wants me to go try Reiki. And look, there are some things that are proven that I believe help me. Like I do hydrotherapy and I take fish oil, but I don't buy into alternative medicine more often than not. And that's mainly because I've worked in pharmacy for a decade. I have a really strong understanding of how dangerous alternative medicine can be. It was in the midst of one such emotional dip that I personally contemplated suicide. The suicide rate for people with chronic fatigue is over 6 times that of the general population. I've never personally, myself, haven't really felt that, but I do. It's something that people come up and ask me about a lot, and a lot more since I've been diagnosed than before. The last stage of grief is acceptance, and ultimately it was acceptance that saved me. The woman that I had been was gone, and I had to grieve her completely before moving on. Importantly, I needed the people around me to grieve that woman too, and give me the space to become someone new. 12 years later, I'm proud of the person I've become. I'm proud of what I see in others with this illness becoming. There is an incredible strength of support and determination in this community, along with political and scientific engagement, and a growing activist movement that bellies the idea that acceptance is giving up. So I suppose what I most want people to be aware of on Chronic Fatigue Awareness Day is that we don't need to be encouraged to become well. We need realism, we need advocacy, we need research. We need permission to grieve, because only then can we really begin to live again. I think this was really well written, and she's been living with this for 12 years. I'm hitting 6 months. I mean, if you really think about it, I've been living with illness since, I guess, the really started when I was 14. So that's 13 years. So half my life. But until recently, it's always been get sick and get better. It's only in 2017 now that I really started this journey of my body's actually so sick that this is my new reality. It isn't going, there may be ups and there may be downs, but I'm not going to get over this. I'm not going to be cured. I'm not going to get better, so to speak. This is my new reality, and I need to accept it. And the thing I'm going to need to work on is making sure that the people around me see this new person that I'm becoming, because it's no longer the same person that I was, say, last year. So yeah, it's odd, it's terrifying, but I think that in this time I'm going to sort of peel away quite a few people in my life that aren't ready to accept the new version of me that I'm becoming. The high energy level that I was before used to attract people, and I found it easy to just bounce around and be a social butterfly and friends and just sort of flirt around and just be. But I'm gonna have to make serious effort to maintain friendships and relationships that I want to keep, and the others will just sort of fall by the wayside, I think. So yeah, it ought to be interesting. But so today is not maybe as funny and as anecdotal as a lot of my life is and has been, but it's important in the same right to my life and to this new journey I'm on, and that's the reason, one of the main reasons that I started this podcast. So I thought it was important to put my thoughts out there, here and now, to sort of verbally grieve for the person that I used to be, and to get myself ready to get to know the new person that I'm becoming. And yeah, I'm going to sort of start that tomorrow. I've made a social engagement, but I've done so within my new parameters. So it'll be a bit of an experiment to see if I can still enjoy myself within the new parameters that I'm given in the old community that doesn't really know the new me yet. But yeah, to be an interesting experiment. One, of course, I'm sure I will talk to you about and tell you all about at a later time, because, yeah, you know. Because, yo, that's what's up.